In 43 years behind this bench, I have seen just about everything a courtroom can hold. I have seen guilt dressed in a suit and innocence dressed in rags. I have seen powerful men crumble, and I have seen humble people stand tall with more dignity than any millionaire I ever met. But every once in a while, a case walks through my door that makes me stop breathing for a second. A case that reminds me exactly why I took this job. A case so wrong, so completely backwards, that even after 4 decades of this work, it still has the power to make my blood run hot. This is one of those cases. Are you watching this right now and thinking you already know where this story goes? I need you to stop right there, because I promise you, what happened in my courtroom on that Tuesday morning is something you are not ready for. Hit that subscribe button right now if you believe real justice should be loud, and then stay with me, because this one is going to stay with you. It was a Tuesday in March, court case number 2024 CR 04471. The docket was full, like it always is. Providence Traffic Court sees dozens of people every single morning. Most of them are good people. Most of them made a small mistake, got a ticket, paid their fine, and went home. That is the way it usually goes. But that morning, 2 very different people walked through the same door, and by the time the day was over, only one of them walked out with their head held high. The first person I want to tell you about is Eleanor Vasquez. She was 74 years old. She walked into my courtroom wearing a pale blue cardigan and sensible shoes, the kind a woman wears when she has been on her feet her whole life, and she is not about to stop now. Her hair was white and neat. She carried a folder of papers in both hands, held tight against her chest, like it was the most important thing she owned. And when the officer called her name, she stood up slowly, walked to the front with careful steps, and she said, "Good morning, Your Honor," just like that, quiet and polite and full of grace. Eleanor had spent 22 years as an Army nurse. She served 2 tours. She came home, raised her children, buried her husband of 41 years, a man named Raymond, who worked at the Port of Providence loading cargo until his back finally gave out. And after Raymond was gone, she did not sit down and feel sorry for herself. She kept moving. She started volunteering at Rhode Island Hospital 3 mornings a week. Candy striper, 74 years old, pushing the little cart down the hallway, bringing magazines and juice to patients who had nobody else to bring them anything. And at home, she was raising her granddaughter, Mia, 12 years old, cerebral palsy. Eleanor was Mia's whole world. Eleanor owned 1 car, a 2008 Honda Civic. 11 years old, a little rust on the passenger door, tires that still had some life left in them. It was not fancy, but it was hers. She paid it off years ago. She used it to drive to the hospital, to drive Mia to her physical therapy appointments on Tuesdays and Fridays, and to the grocery store on Saturday mornings. That car was not transportation. That car was her lifeline. On the morning of February 3rd, at approximately 10:47 in the morning, Eleanor parked that Civic in the hospital volunteer lot, walked inside, and spent the next 4 hours bringing comfort to strangers. When she came back out at 2:51 in the afternoon, the car was gone. She stood in that parking lot for a moment. She looked up and down the rows. She walked around. And then it hit her. Her car had been stolen. She filed a police report that same afternoon, report number R2024-02377214, taken by Officer Daniel Reyes, badge number 4471, at 3:22 p.m. Officer Reyes told her they would look into it. He told her these things sometimes resolve themselves. He was kind about it, but Eleanor went home on the bus that night with Mia's hand in hers, and she worried. Because without that car, how was she going to get Mia to physical therapy? How was she going to get to the hospital to volunteer? How was she going to live her life? 3 weeks later, something strange happened. A citation arrived in Eleanor's mailbox, a red light camera ticket. Her car, license plate RI4LMK809, had been caught running a red light at the intersection of Atwells Avenue and Toby Street at 11:23 p.m. on February 8th. 5 days after the car was stolen. The fine was $230. I want you to let that sink in. Her car was stolen. Someone else drove it through a red light in the middle of the night, and the city sent the bill to Eleanor. She did what any honest person would do. She came to court to explain. She brought her police report. She brought her theft report number. She brought everything she had in that little folder she was clutching. She was not there to cause trouble. She was there because she trusted that someone would listen. And that is what brought her to my courtroom on that Tuesday morning. Now, let me tell you about the second person. Before I do that, I have something to ask you. We are about 3 minutes into this story, and I want to issue you a personal challenge. I dare you to watch this all the way to the end without feeling something, because what is coming next, what that second person did and how they acted in my courtroom, I dare you to stay calm. Keep watching. This is where it starts to get very real. Marcus Delacroix was 34 years old. He walked into my courtroom at 9:14 in the morning, and the first thing I noticed was the watch. A Rolex Submariner, blue dial, on a wrist that he kept turning just enough so the light hit it. He was wearing a white button-down shirt, the kind that costs $400 and is made to look like it did not try too hard. His belt was Hermes, black leather with the gold H buckle. His shoes were Balenciaga Triple S sneakers, the thick, ugly ones that cost close to $900, and somehow that is considered fashionable. His phone was face up on the gallery bench when he sat down, a gold iPhone case with his initials on it in diamonds, real ones by the look of them. He had a lawyer with him, not a public defender, a private attorney named Gregory Fallon, who I recognized because he had appeared in my courtroom before on behalf of other people whose families had money and whose problems had a habit of going away. Marcus sat with his arms crossed and his chin up, and when he looked around the courtroom, he had the kind of look on his face that told me he was not worried. Not even a little bit. Marcus Delacroix was the son of Councilman Victor Delacroix, who had served on the Providence City Council for 11 years and sat on the Public Safety Subcommittee. I want you to remember that detail. I want you to hold on to it. Marcus had been cited for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, a traffic stop on February 11, 2024 at 12:19 a.m. Officer Patricia Souza, badge number 3382, had pulled over a 2008 Honda Civic license plate RI 4 LMK 809 running without working taillights on Route 10. When she ran the plates, the car came back stolen. The driver was Marcus Delacroix. He was in Eleanor Vasquez's car at midnight, 8 days after it was stolen from the hospital parking lot. When Officer Souza asked him how he came to be driving a stolen vehicle, Marcus told her that he had borrowed it from a friend. He did not know the name of the friend. He did not have a contact number for the friend. He just said he borrowed it and he thought everything was fine. Officer Souza cited him and impounded the car. She was professional, she was thorough, and because of her work, that car eventually found its way back to Eleanor Vasquez, which was the one small mercy in this whole story. But here is what made me sit up straight in my chair that morning. When Officer Souza ran Marcus's name and his license, she found something else. In the past 18 months, Marcus Delacroix had been stopped 3 times in 3 different vehicles, all of which were later connected to theft reports filed by their owners, 3 times, and each time the case had been continued, delayed, or quietly dismissed. Case numbers 2022 TR 11904, 2023 TR 0531, and 2023 TR 09887. 3 times this man had sat in a car that did not belong to him. 3 times nothing had happened to him. And here he was in my courtroom looking at his Rolex, waiting for the 4th time to go the same way. His attorney, Gregory Fallon, stood up with the confidence of a man who has done this many times before. He said his client was a young professional with strong community ties and no prior convictions. He said the case was a misunderstanding. He said that Marcus had cooperated fully with police and that the matter should be resolved with a small fine and time served. He said all of this in about 90 seconds, the way you say something you have memorized, and then he sat down and Marcus adjusted his Rolex and looked bored. I looked at Eleanor. She was still holding her folder. She was watching all of this. I saw her face. It was not angry, it was tired. And that tiredness told me more than anything else that morning. It was the tiredness of a woman who had been doing everything right her whole life and still kept finding herself in rooms like this one, trying to prove something she should not have had to prove at all. I asked Marcus to stand. I said, Mr. Delacroix, do you understand that the woman sitting in this courtroom right now, the woman whose car you were driving at midnight on February 11th, received a red light citation for a violation you committed while you had her stolen vehicle? He looked at me. He shrugged. He actually shrugged. He said, and I am telling you exactly what he said. He said, Your Honor, I didn't steal anything. I borrowed a car. That's not my problem if the paperwork got mixed up. The paperwork got mixed up. A 74-year-old Army nurse who raised a granddaughter with cerebral palsy, all by herself, on a fixed income, was sitting in my court facing a $230 fine for a red light ticket because this man in a $900 pair of sneakers drove her car through an intersection at 11 o'clock at night, and he called it mixed up paperwork. I told myself to breathe. I have been doing this for 43 years. I know when to breathe. Now here is where I need to stop for just one moment, because what I am about to tell you next is the part that went viral, the part that people could not stop talking about. But before I get there, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now and tell me honestly, what would you do if you were sitting in my chair right then? What would you say to that man? Because what I found next, it did not just change that courtroom, it changed everything about this case. Stay with me. I asked Officer Souza to approach. She was still in the courtroom. I asked her to tell me, in her own words, what she had observed when she pulled over Marcus Delacroix on the night of February 11th. She stood at the front of my courtroom and she described it clearly and professionally. She said that when she approached the vehicle, Marcus appeared calm and unhurried. She said there was a gym bag in the back seat. She said the car smelled of an air freshener that had clearly been recently placed, one of those cardboard tree shapes hanging from the mirror, still bright green. She said Marcus had been polite, almost rehearsed, like he had been through this before. And then she told me something I had not read in the initial report. She told me that when she impounded the vehicle, her partner, Officer James Tennyson, badge number 4003, had searched the car as part of standard impound procedure. In the center console of Eleanor Vasquez's 2008 Honda Civic, he found a key ring with 9 keys on it. Not car keys, door keys, house keys, different shapes, different brands, some labeled in black marker, 9 keys, in a stolen car, on a key ring that did not belong to Eleanor Vasquez. Gregory Fallon was on his feet in 2 seconds. He said this was speculation. He said those keys could have come from the previous owner. He said anything. He said it loud and fast, the way lawyers talk when they know something has just gone very wrong for their client. I held up my hand. Gregory Fallon sat down. I looked at Marcus. He was still standing, but the Rolex was not turning in the light anymore. His arms were at his sides now. Something had changed in his posture, just slightly, but I noticed. After 43 years, you notice. I said, Mr. Delacroix, can you explain to me what those keys were doing in this vehicle? He said, I don't know anything about any keys. I said, 9 keys, son, on a single ring, in a car that was reported stolen. What does a person need 9 keys for? He looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked straight ahead. Nobody had a good answer for that. And then my clerk, Maria Santos, who has worked beside me for 14 years and who has the sharpest instincts of anyone I have ever worked with, she leaned over and placed a printed document on my bench. She did it quietly. She always does things quietly, but her eyes told me to read it carefully. It was a printout from Instagram. The account name was MarkDXPVD, 41,000 followers, and the most recent post, dated February 9th, the day after Eleanor's car ran a red light that Marcus was behind the wheel for, showed a picture from inside a moving car. You could see the dashboard, the steering wheel, the little pine tree air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. And the caption said, and I am reading it exactly as it was written, Joyride is in, told y'all I move different. Old lady left her keys in the whip, call that an invitation law, streets stay providing. He had posted it publicly on his own Instagram page with 41,000 people following him, a picture taken from inside Eleanor Vasquez's stolen car, laughing about it, calling it an invitation, mocking a 74-year-old woman for what he had done to her. The courtroom went quiet. I mean completely quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight to it. I set the printout down on my bench. I looked at Marcus Delacroix for a long moment. He was looking at the floor now. I said, "Is this your account, Mr. Delacroix?" His attorney stood up and said his client would not be answering questions without further consultation. I said, "You have 41,000 followers on this account, Mr. Delacroix. You made this post 6 days ago, and you are standing here today telling me you borrowed this car and you do not know anything about any keys." Marcus looked up. And here is where something shifted in him. When a man is cornered, and he is not used to being cornered, one of two things happens. He folds, or he gets mean. Marcus Delacroix got mean. He looked at me. He straightened up. He said, and again I am telling you his exact words, "Your Honor, I know how this works. I know people in this city. My father has been on the council for 11 years. You've been a judge here for what, 40 years? You think I don't know how this game is played? You're going to make an example out of me because of who I am. That's what this really is. You're just an old man with a gavel who likes making young people feel small." The gallery made a sound. I cannot describe it exactly. It was somewhere between a gasp and a groan. I did not respond immediately. I folded my hands. I looked at him for about 5 full seconds, because in this work, when someone tries to rattle you, the most powerful thing you can do is go still. My father taught me that. He was a barber. He raised 6 children in a small house in Providence, and he never had much money, and he had more dignity than any man I ever met. He used to say, "The loudest voice in the room is usually the most afraid." I thought of him right then. I thought of him, and I went still. I said, "Mr. Delacroix, I have been sitting in this chair since before you were born. I have heard many things said to me from where you are standing, but I will tell you something. Not one of those things ever changed what the evidence showed, and the evidence here is speaking very clearly. If you have stayed with me this far, you are exactly the kind of person I made this video for. You believe that nobody should be above the law, not the rich, not the connected, not the ones with 41,000 followers and a father on the city council. Join this community. Hit that like button right now. Let the algorithm know that justice still matters to people. You being here matters. Let me show you what happened next, because what happened next was something even I did not see coming. At 10:31 that Tuesday morning, while Gregory Fallon was preparing a motion, and while Marcus Delacroix was standing with his expensive shoes on my courtroom floor, the doors opened. 2 people walked in. One of them was a woman in a dark blazer. The other was a man I recognized. His name was Special Agent David Caruso, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Rhode Island Field Office. I had worked alongside Agent Caruso before on a case 3 years prior. He was quiet and methodical, and he did not make dramatic entrances. The fact that he was in my courtroom at all told me that this had moved far past a traffic stop. Agent Caruso approached and asked to address the court. I allowed it. He told me that Marcus Delacroix had been under federal investigation for the past 7 months. Operation Copper Key, case number FBI PVD 2024-0034. The investigation covered a theft ring responsible for the unauthorized taking of 31 vehicles across Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut over a 14-month period. 17 of those vehicles had been taken from hospital parking lots. The key ring found in Eleanor's car matched key types documented in 4 other theft reports from the same period, and Mark DXPVD, his Instagram account, had been used to document and in some cases coordinate the movements of the ring. The 9 keys found in Eleanor's center console were evidence in a federal case. 31 cars, 17 of them from hospital parking lots. He had been targeting the parking lots of hospitals, places where nurses and volunteers and sick patients and their worried families left their cars. He had been targeting people who were already having the hardest days of their lives. I looked at Marcus Delacroix. He was not straight anymore. His shoulders were down. His attorney had stopped writing. The Rolex on his wrist looked very heavy all of a sudden. Agent Caruso also told me something else. The red light citation that Eleanor Vasquez had received, the one for $230, was one of 6 citations issued to 6 different car owners whose vehicles had been in the possession of this ring. 6 elderly or low-income people had received traffic fines for violations committed in their stolen cars. 6 people who had already lost their transportation were then billed for crimes they did not commit. The city had collected over $1,200 in fines from victims. Eleanor Vasquez pressed her folder tighter against her chest. I saw her close her eyes for just a moment, just one moment. I said, "Mrs. Vasquez, please stand." She stood. She looked at me. I said, "Mrs. Vasquez, before we go any further, I want to say something to you directly. You should not be standing in this courtroom today, not as a defendant. You came here because you trusted the system, and you were right to trust it, because the system, on this day, in this room, is going to work the way it is supposed to work. Your citation is dismissed, completely, not reduced, dismissed. And the $230 filing fee you paid when you registered for this hearing will be returned to you in full." She said, "Thank you, Your Honor." Her voice did not shake. It was steady and quiet and full of something that I can only describe as grace. Now I turned to Marcus Delacroix. I said, "Mr. Delacroix, you came into this courtroom today expecting this to go the way it always has for you. You expected a small fine. You expected your attorney to handle it. You expected your father's name to do what it has apparently done for you before. And you showed your contempt for this process in every way possible, from the moment you walked in, to the shrug you gave me, to the post you made about this woman on your public Instagram, to the insult you directed at me not 15 minutes ago." He was looking at the floor. I said, "I want you to look at Eleanor Vasquez." He looked up. He looked at her. I said, "This woman served her country for 22 years as an Army nurse. She raised her family. She buried her husband. She is raising her disabled granddaughter by herself on a fixed income. She volunteers 3 mornings a week at Rhode Island Hospital. And you took her car. You took the thing that connects her to all of that. You took her ability to get her granddaughter to therapy. And then you posted about it online and laughed." I let that sit for a moment. Then I gave him my sentence. I told Marcus Delacroix that on top of whatever federal charges Agent Caruso's office would be pursuing, which were not within my jurisdiction, but were certainly within my concern, I was issuing the following from my bench: 180 days of community service to be served in full. The community service would be performed exclusively at Rhode Island Hospital under the supervision of the volunteer coordinator. He would serve in the same program where Eleanor Vasquez volunteered. He would push the same cart she pushed. He would bring the same juice and magazines to the same patients. He would wear the same volunteer badge. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning for 6 months, Marcus Delacroix, in his Hermes belt and his Balenciaga sneakers, would walk those hospital hallways, and he would do it the way Eleanor did it, with humility, in service to others. He was also ordered to personally and in writing reimburse every one of the 6 vehicle owners who had received traffic citations connected to his ring, every cent, with a written letter of apology reviewed by my clerk, not by his attorney, by my clerk, who would make sure the words were real, and I suspended his driver's license for 2 years, because a man who treats other people's cars like invitations does not deserve to drive. Gregory Fallon started to object. I said, "Mr. Fallon, I suggest you advise your client that this is the last mercy he will see from a bench in this state for quite some time." Gregory Fallon sat down. Marcus Delacroix stood there. The arrogance was gone, completely gone. In its place was just a young man realizing for the first time in his life that his father's name had a limit, that his watch could not buy him out of this room, that 41,000 followers could not change what the evidence showed, that everything he thought protected him had just run out. Eleanor Vasquez put her folder down on the seat beside her. She did not clap. She did not cheer. She just sat down slowly and folded her hands in her lap. And I saw the smallest smile cross her face, not triumphant, not angry, just peaceful, the smile of someone who had walked a very long way and finally reached the right door. Now let me tell you what I have been thinking about ever since that morning. This case was not really about a car. It was about what we decide people are worth. When Eleanor Vasquez walked into this courtroom, someone had already decided that she was worth less than a $230 fine. Someone had decided that her time and her struggles and her service to this country were less important than processing a citation quickly and collecting a fee. That is the quiet, invisible kind of injustice that happens every day to people who do not have attorneys or connections or Instagram followers. It happens to elderly women in pale blue cardigans who carry their paperwork in a folder because they have learned to always keep their paperwork. And when Marcus Delacroix walked into this courtroom, he believed the opposite. He believed that his name and his wealth and his father's position placed him above the accounting. He had been allowed to believe that for a long time. 3 prior stops in stolen vehicles. 3 times the system looked the other way. When a young man is allowed to act without consequence, you do not teach him responsibility. You teach him that consequences are for other people. You build the very arrogance that stood in my courtroom that morning and called me an old man with a gavel. That is not justice. That is the opposite of justice. In 43 years on this bench, I have learned one thing above all others. The law is only as strong as the willingness of the people who serve it to apply it equally, to the powerful and the powerless, to the wealthy and the struggling, to the man in the $900 sneakers and the woman in the sensible shoes. Equal, not almost equal. Not equal when it is convenient. Equal every single time, in every single case, without exception. Eleanor Vasquez deserved equal. Marcus Delacroix needed equal. And on that Tuesday in March, in case number 2024 CR 04471, in a courtroom in Providence, Rhode Island, equal is exactly what they both got. That is the only job I have ever wanted. And as long as I am sitting in this chair, it is the job I will keep doing.